Welcome to the Relevance Report, where we explore the relevant stories that are shaping our world today. I'm Christina Felker, your host this week. On today's show, we'll delve into the impact of social media on mental health from a psychologist's perspective. Then we'll look at the journey of the challenges and triumphs an international student from Ukraine faces. We'll unpack the process of immigrant integration in Canada, and we'll shift gears to the world of sport by looking at the African Cup of Nations. Finally, let's grab our jackets and toques and head to Edmonton's International Ice Carving Competition in Canada. With the increase in social media usage, teenagers are feeling the effects it has on their mental health. Yusuf Shtabu sat down with Ricardo Sarango, a psychologist specializing in helping teenagers in schools around Edmonton with their emotional processes and behaviors.
How can someone identify when their social media use is becoming unhealthy or detrimental to their mental health? What steps do you think they can take to address it?
I think everybody's going to have their own kind of like early warning signs of like when social media is going to start to impact their mental health or well-being. But, generally there's a couple like of those base level impacts that we look for. So, we definitely look for like interruptions of sleep, interruptions of like appetite. If we start to lose engagement in things that we've been like previously interested or engaged in. So my schedule starts to change. My self-care starts to be affected. My routine starts to be impacted. We're looking for like changes to that baseline kind of behavior. Now, the hard part is, the younger you're exposed to social media, social media starts to become a part of your baseline behavior. So, often what we say is like awareness is like one of those beginner steps. So like, if you are starting to lose awareness about the impact on social media, do you have people in your life that you trust when they come up to you and say, hey, I'm a little worried about like how social media is impacting you?
Yeah, of course. I think it's important to have that person beside you. I think that person that you could trust with speaking on, possible sensitive information about yourself. What advice do you have for parents in helping their children develop a healthy relationship with social media from a mental health perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if there's a simple answer, then there'd be a book and everybody would just read it and follow it. So I think like understanding like the complexity of the situation is a really, really important start for most parents. Give yourself some education, get informed on like social media, the aspects and stuff like that. But I think in my experience, like one of the biggest like benefiting factors is like develop that relationship with your child. That parent-child relationship is going to give you a pathway for being able to talk to your kid about some of these concerns that you might have, or some of these encouragements that you might want to support in their accessing of social media. So what we're actually promoting is not increased control in terms of like social media usage and stuff like that. What we're actually encouraging is like better relationship development, so that you can problem solve as a family, or you can problem solve as a parent-child within that parent-child relationship, and actually come out of it with an answer that both supports the child and their engagement with like social media.
Yeah, I also think that parent and children relationship is also very important. How can those mindfulness and self-care practices be integrated into social media use to promote mental well-being?
I think my approach and in my experience has always been like, if I'm ever going to develop a goal, I try to develop the development of a positive goal. Often when we think about goal setting, we often think about, let me eliminate a negative aspect or a negative behavior that I'm enabling. So the problem with that approach is that every day I wake up and I'm like, don't do this, right? Don't spend hours on social media. Don't avoid my work by playing video games, right? So the problem is I'm waking up already in the mindset of like not trying to screw up. And if I happen to look on social media, or if I happen to engage on like online gaming, then, that only enables that negative kind of mind frame. And I'm like, man, I screwed up already, right? So, some general like little kind of tips would be like, hey, I want to be able to like engage in and connect with somebody online and give some positive messages to others. Or, hey, I want to be able to feel fulfilled in what I do within a reasonable amount of time and still be able to like provide self-care or engagement with other people in real life. So it's always about, for me, at least in my experience, the development of a positive goal creates a lot more motivation for individuals wanting to kind of find that balance with their social media usage.
A researcher at the University of Alberta investigates arsenic levels in biological fluids, exploring environmental health dynamics post-ingestion. Originally from Ukraine, she now resides in Edmonton, exemplifying the pursuit of academic passions through studying abroad. Dreesen Blas interviewed Tetiana Daviduk to delve into her academic journey and experiences.
What motivated you to undertake such a significant move?
It was something that I needed to think about, because I did feel that moving to another country at the beginning I applied for master's, so that was at least 2 years, could change my trajectory, and it just very different experience be away from home. But the type of research that I could do in Canada was really aligning with my interests, so it felt like all of the challenges are worth going through to try to fulfill a dream.
What were some of the challenges you encountered during your transition to life in Canada, particularly as an international student? As we know, student life is not easy, and moving to another country as a student and starting a new life is challenging.
For the challenges, well, I guess first it was just figuring out all the details in terms of documentations and just getting adjusted, getting settled. So that was about first 2 weeks, I guess. And then in terms of international student experience within like education, the system and the structure of the program was very different than I knew before. So I think just orienting myself within the system and figuring out how things work, what are my responsibilities as a student, what are the cultural aspects that I need to be aware of, I guess those were the first challenges.
What drew you to the University of Alberta for research? Was there a specific aspect of the university's reputation or academic offerings that attached you?
I think mainly the experience during undergraduate studies as an intern. I was an intern at University of Alberta. Excellence being a priority and people's motivation around, also availability of modern equipment, and we had the opportunity to get a lot of hands-on experience. So I think those were, things that motivated me to gain more from this environment and hopefully contribute more as well.
Could you tell us more about the focus of your research at the University of Alberta?
Oh yeah, sure. That's an exciting topic for any researcher. I'm working my research is in chemistry, and I am in the area of analytical environmental chemistry, which basically means we are using analytical techniques, different types of instruments and assays to do the measurement, and my measurements are focusing on measuring arsenic in biological fluids. So we are looking at how people are transforming contaminants after they were ingested. In particular, I'm looking at arsenic as one of the contaminants.
And what inspired you to pursue this particular area of study?
Well, I've always been interested in people's health and how the environment can affect our health. So ability to determine concentration of arsenic in different types of foods, and also ability to understand how it's metabolized, is a great way to understand better interaction of our health and the environment around us. So I think that was my main motivation.
As an experienced researcher from abroad, so what advice would you give to other inspiring researchers or students considering studying abroad?
I think, from my perspective, I would start with thinking about what you're really interested in, because I think this is the most important thing, to have the drive towards what you are going to do. So I would advise starting with researching, like where do you want to go in terms of research, and then looking at the places where people are working on similar things, because I guess that's the best part, when you can get into the environment where people are very interested in the things that you are interested in, so it can provide you a space where you can grow.
Canada prides itself as a nation committed to welcoming and promoting its diverse cultural background. However, as more immigrants move to Canada, they face difficulties integrating into Canadian society due to cultural differences. Trisha Solis sat down with sociology professor Dr. Kalyani Thoraraja to discuss the process of Canada's role in preserving multiculturalism.
One of your research interests and expertise is ethnic identities. Can you tell us a little bit about what factors contribute to forming ethnic identities?
We use race and ethnicity interchangeably, and we really shouldn't. Often when we're talking about race, what we mean is the perceived physical differences and the meanings we attach to it, right? Now, ethnicity is not about perceived physical differences. It's about how groups make boundaries around each other due to some kind of shared belief system. So it could be shared belief system around religion, language, territory. So we originated in this space and we have common folklore or stories of origin. And often ethnicity is not just one of those things, but a combination of, right? So ethnicity is nuanced, race is crude.
How does the process of integration impact an immigrant's sense of identity?
When we think about this, you have to think about age as well, and also the culture of origin and the culture of settlement. So the younger you are, the easier it is for you to learn the values of your culture of settlement, because you're going to be interacting with many more social institutions. So you're going to go through the school system, and we know that school socializes you to learn the language, learn to eat at this time, learn to play certain sports and certain things. So you are going to have a much easier time doing that than if you are older, in which case often you're only interacting with your workplace, and depending on your workplace, there might not be a lot of socialization happening. So part of it is age, but also it's much easier to integrate when there isn't a huge cultural distance. If there's something that is shared, it's much easier to integrate than when there is not. So the process of integration can be very challenging for folks who are not given opportunity in this new society to be able to integrate. So if we're not giving them space to interact with us, how can they integrate?
I've actually heard stories from immigrant kids about how their parents refuse to teach and speak their language around them to make it easier to learn English and fit into Canadian society. As they get older, do you think kids experiencing the same situation will have a harder time connecting and maintaining their ethnic roots because of the forced assimilation by their parents?
Children are going to learn English because they're going to English-speaking schools. What they're not going to be able to keep is the language of origin, because they're not getting practice with that. And so the research often shows that when these children grow up, they're actually feel resentful and they regret the parents' decision, because it's much harder, as we know, to learn language as an adult. Language is the way that we create community. So if you say you're a member of a particular group, but you can't speak the language of that group, can you claim membership?
Since the enactment of the multiculturalism policy in 1971, Canada continues to be recognized as a country where diversity is promoted, celebrated, and respected.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that Canada is upholding their commitment to preserving and enhancing the diverse ethnic identities?
I mean, Canada has set itself up on the world stage as a leader in this way. If you're checking out any of our official websites, it's multiculturalism this, it's multiculturalism that. So it would indicate that we care about these things. But scholars who study multiculturalism argue that we keep using this word multiculturalism, but if you were to actually ask Canadians, define multiculturalism, they don't really know what multiculturalism is. And often people associate multiculturalism with race and not ethnicity. So they think, oh, that small town is not multicultural, and what they mean is that small town is white. But that small town could be made up of Ukrainians and all sorts of other folks who are racialized as white, right? And so one might argue, actually, that we've moved away from ethnic preservation because we don't emphasize this enough. I think Canada has been trying, but the biggest failure on their part is they haven't really defined. If you look at the act, they don't define it clearly, and so then Canadians are being taught about multiculturalism in a very symbolic, not even symbolic, very performative way.
How can we help immigrants preserve and maintain their ethnic identity?
We continue to ensure that groups or communities have access to the resources they need to build the infrastructure they need, right? So a big challenge when we're thinking about multiculturalism and ethnic representation around the country is, well, do you have the temples and mosques? Do you have grocery stores? What we can do is bring in those resources, but also socialize in those communities. Just because they might want to play cricket on a Saturday doesn't mean they don't want to learn hockey, right? So are you welcoming them to your hockey team? But also, are you cheering them on at the cricket game? Because as I said, integration is not about one side learning, it's about both sides making room for one another.
The African Cup of Nations isn't just another soccer tournament. To Africans around the world, the tournament is a collective opportunity to support their nation's efforts to lift this prestigious trophy and inspire future generations. Ilyas Mohammed interviewed sports media creator Mohamed Jama to discuss the importance of the African Cup of Nations and predict the tournament's outcome.
How excited were you for the return of AFCON? It only comes every 2 years.
Super excited for it. This tournament's a great tournament to display African talent around the world of football. You know, some African players play in Europe nowadays, and like the talent on display from Africa has been absolutely stupendous throughout the last couple of seasons, with players playing for some of the biggest clubs in the world, like Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspur, stuff like that. So I'm excited to see all the African talent from Africa and African talent in Europe play in one tournament.
How significant is AFCON for you as an African football fan?
As an African football fan, I feel like it shines a light on the game in Africa as a whole and gives inspiration to people from Africa to play the sport and to see that they can achieve their goals in the sport. When they see players from their country playing internationally in other leagues and stuff, and then they come home to represent their team midway through the season, proving how important it is to them. And just altogether, this brings a big light to African football.
How significant do you think it is for those fans who watch their country play in the AFCON?
I think it's super significant. Like us being Canadians, when we saw Canada play in the World Cup last year, it was an amazing experience. You know, we all got to sit at home, or even in classrooms, teachers were letting students watch the game and just support their country. That's a feeling that everyone can get around and everyone can experience in Africa now with their teams playing in the AFCON. It's a sense of pride and, you know, something to look forward to for people that maybe sometimes don't have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I could imagine like places in Africa, like for example Ghana or Nigeria, if they're in a big game, semifinals, finals, I can imagine how time must stand still for not only football fans, but just people who love their country. They must, put work on hold, put their day-to-day stuff on hold just to sit all together and come together as a community and watch the game. That's what I love about football. It brings people together. So I can imagine how important it must be to those fans in Africa, how they get that time to come together and just enjoy watching their country prosper, or not, but, not everyone can win the tournament. There can only be one winner. That's what makes it so special. Now, would you say the AFCON inspires people, like it can push people to chase their footballing dreams and represent their country on the big stage?
Of course. Like, you see players that started in the grassroots of African football now playing for some of the biggest clubs in the world. So, as a kid, when you're dreaming of playing football, those guys are great inspirations to look up to, saying, like, they're from my country, they're from my city, and they made it to the biggest stage in football, one day where I hope to be. So, of course, it's an inspiration for them.
Yeah, I can imagine even for kids in Edmonton, they might look up to Alphonso Davies, someone who grew up in the not most safest area of Edmonton, but we now see him on a daily basis playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, Bayern Munich over in Germany. And he achieved his dream, and he's going to inspire more Edmontonians. So I can imagine the AFCON will have the same effect on kids in Africa. Now, what is your favorite thing about the AFCON? Maybe the chaos, the fans, the funny moments. What do you like the most about it?
Definitely the fans. The fans add a different aspect to the game that no other tournament probably has, because African fans are some of the most passionate fans in the whole entire world, and they will ride or die for their nation. You see fans getting absolutely outraged when their teams lose, outside of the stadium, throwing fits, yelling at people, and then inside the stadium when their team wins or scores a last-minute winner, you just see the absolute jubilation on their face, how happy they are. Like, a goal can bring a whole nation together. That's why the fans in AFCON are absolutely the greatest.
Lastly on today's show, a Canadian international ice carving competition. With creative energy flowing, competing in this competition are 7 teams of internationally acclaimed ice carving artists, creating icy art while working with 15 blocks of ice to complete their sculptures in 34 hours. Christina Felker was there during bone-chilling temperatures and spoke with one of the artist duos, Mo and Don. This duo shared their passion for this unique art form and their experience as ice carving artists.
My name's Don Lowing. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And I am Muafak Nima. You can call me Mo. I am originally from Iraq, immigrated to Canada 23 years ago. So I can say I am from Ottawa. That's my home. I am a visual artist, so I do painting and sculpting.
How did you become an ice carving artist?
Back in the day, I used to be a chef, and I would do it for events at the places that I ran, but I really loved the medium, so I started to really focus just on ice. I always say I couldn't take the heat, so I got out of the kitchen, and I went right to the freezer, and I started making ice and art and meeting great artists like Mo. I've been doing this for over 25 years.
I learned in Fine Art Academy about painting and sculpting, but I never learned this medium. So when I came to Canada and I find out, I'm gonna paint, but what am I gonna do in the winter? Those guys are having fun with the ice. So I joined the Ice Carvers Society in Ottawa, and there I learned a lot about this medium. And the first year was just learning. The next year I start competing.
How did you become a working duo?
Years ago, we met at a competition in Yellowknife. We were on different teams, and we just connected, had similar interests, liked each other's style. So we said, hey, let's team up and do a competition together. And for many years now, we've just been teaming up for events like this and making crazy, awesome art.
How many years have you guys been together now?
I think 8 years. We are doing every competition that we can. We just came from Italy. Even if there's a competition that we participate individually, we'll do that. But we are having fun with this medium. It's beautiful.
How do you prepare for a competition like this one?
Preparation, there's a lot behind it. First, it starts with the design. What's inspiring to you? Is it something that you want to test yourself about? So there's a lot of design aspect of it to try and really come up with something unique that hasn't been done before. And then the next part is to really break it down into the time frame that you have, the amount of the material that you have, and the weather conditions. That plays a big role in how you engineer these things. So it's a mix of art and engineering, and it's a bit of passion, and it's like being an athlete. So it's very physically rigorous, and you just have to be prepared on that aspect as well. So it's multiple pieces that come together, both personally, artistically, to come here and make beautiful art for everybody.
How does the weather, since you've mentioned, for better or worse, impact what you do?
The weather definitely impacts this, especially with ice. Ice is a changing medium throughout the day when you're working with it, before you're working with it, and after, when we're finished. The weather's going to impact it in different ways. So we consider that when we design a piece. Is it going to be a cold weather event? Is it going to be a warm weather event? And there's different ways to design it to accommodate the different weather and changing weather conditions.
And how do you stay warm in these bone-chilling temperatures and not lose enthusiasm?
Don explained it when it is very physical. Actually, we are sweating in our jacket. It's very consuming for us. So power and energy. So we burn lots of calories. We don't feel the cold as much as in our feet and fingers. Other than that, we are just going. The beauty of the work distract us from feeling the weather. And here we are having fun with the piece, and we do stuff with passion, and I was taking some of the weight of the piece and I broke one of the pieces. It is challenging medium and challenging form of art, and we love it, including the challenge.
What is the craziest thing that's happened to you during a carving competition?
I mean, anytime a piece breaks during a competition, that's a challenge, but we have techniques that we can fix it, with our knowledge and techniques. Probably the other challenge is, when you get really tall with pieces, you have to consider a couple different things. How are you going to make it so that it stays large?
And what tips would you give someone who wants to become an ice carver?
If you want to become an ice carver, I think it's a great medium to start with and to try out. It's a fun medium. It's faster than other mediums. You can see through it. I mean, that's such a cool property to sculpting ice, is that it's water at the end of the day. And it's just very unique. So I would say always go out there, try it, get some chisels, get a chainsaw, come to a competition, make friends with an artist, just try it out. Just volunteer some time and you'll get to discover how much fun it is.
Thanks for joining us for the Relevance Report. This week's episode was produced by Christina Felker, Drisim Dlas, Trisha Solis, Yusuf Shtabu, and Ilyas Mohammed. The show was edited by Drisim Dlas. The show's supervising producer is Sheena Rossiter. Additional studio supervision by Sasha Stenoyevich. This podcast is produced as part of the BCSC 325 Radio News and Documentaries course in the winter 2024 semester. The course is part of the Bachelor of Communication Studies program in the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. The show was edited and produced out of the MacEwan Media Production Studio. Our theme music is called Buzzing by Kaylee Lambert. Additional music on this episode is Better Day by Penguin Music, found on Pixabay. Logo design for this podcast is by Sasha Stenoyevich. And I'm Christina Felker, your host for this week's episode. This podcast was recorded on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Regions 2, 3, and 4, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Don't forget to subscribe to the Relevance Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review and rating. It really helps people find the show. Please join us again next week when we report the relevant stories that are shaping our world.